I'm now delighted to welcome our next two speakers who are going to be joining us now for the next half an hour. So please do have your questions ready for them as well. We're going to hear about breaking the bottlenecks, why AI ambitions fail without process confidence. So a warm welcome to David Barnes, who is head of business process management even at AstraZeneca, and also Alexander Trail, who is the Senior Account Executive for Northern Europe at GBTEC. Hello, both of you. Thank you very much for joining today.
Hi, Georgina.
Excellent. Well, I know that you've got some very exciting conversation between you, so I'm going to pass across to you now for your session. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be showing and presenting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just share my screen with everyone. So yes, as you mentioned, my name is Alex Trail. Hopefully everyone can see my screen now. I'm a Senior Account Executive for Northern Europe and joined today by David Barnes from AstraZeneca. And although Georgina gave us a very short introduction, I'll let David maybe say a bit more around his role at AstraZeneca and what they're working on within the organization too, very briefly.
Thank you, Alex. And just to say, I can't see your screen
personally.
personally.
Oh, no problem. Let me try again.
Yeah, that looks better.
Hopefully no. Yes, fantastic stuff.
Something's coming up. Right, well, it's very nice to meet you all. So, yeah, as Georgina said, I work in AstraZeneca, which is a global pharmaceutical company where we push the boundaries of science to deliver life-changing medicines. And specifically, I sit in a business unit called Global Operations. So this is where we manufacture our medicines from around about 30 internal manufacturing sites. And we also partner with many external contract manufacturing organizations before delivering those medicines to our patients. So my role is head of business process management in operations. And BPM is how we know our business, run our business, and change and transform our business. So I'm very much looking forward to discussing this report with Alex and the audience. And I've already read ahead, and there are some very interesting insights.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, as Georgina mentioned today, what we'll be covering. So today we'll be focusing on a recent report published by GBTEC. You can see on the right-hand side, the Process Excellence and AI Readiness report. We will briefly go into the methodology behind the research, but we'll be focusing most of our time today on the dimensions of process excellence, which were a key theme and key finding from this piece of work, and the solution path to AI readiness as well. And we should hopefully have some time at the end of our 30-minute presentation to answer some of your questions as well. So a bit about the study itself. So we recently commissioned it of around 600 senior operational and business leaders. These were from different markets. You can see North America, Europe, and APAC included, with organizations of 500 or more employees. And we didn't just focus on one line of business or one industry. These respondents came from the energy sector, pharmaceuticals, telecoms, everything across the board, I should say, and from all different parts of the business, whether it be operations, compliance, IT, or change and transformation teams. And one of the major findings from the research, and this will come as no surprise to everyone in here today, is that the vast majority of organizations are planning or will be executing on major transformation programs over the next 2 years. And that within this, nearly 9 out of 10 of our respondees believe that without clear visibility of their end-to-end processes, these transformation initiatives and efforts were very likely to fail or not meet their original goals. So we can see, whilst many organizations are rushing into AI, we saw that about 90% weren't confident that their current approach, or they didn't have the foundational processes in place and the clarity they need in order to be fully successful in realizing their ambitions. But when we talk about process excellence, what exactly do we mean? Well, we've broken it down into these 6 different dimensions or aspects of process excellence: process maturity, process governance, alignment with enterprise architecture, embedding GRC into your processes and process management, automation readiness, and AI enablement. And we'll be going through each of these today, providing some high-level overview of what the research found, and then David will be giving his expert opinion on what he's worked on in the past and what is currently being done at AstraZeneca. So we will start with process maturity. So you can see nearly 8 out of 10 of our respondees came back to us and said that to a large extent, they think their organizations are in some way guessing how their processes work. And this really isn't a surprise. You can see when we gave people the options, 6 different options of where they would categorize themselves when it came to this process maturity, less than 1 in 5 put themselves in that highest bucket of AI-powered process maturity, with nearly half, or nearly 40%, I should say, being in those bottom 3 buckets. So you can see a huge amount of work to be done for the vast majority of organizations. And I would like to hand over to David with this first question. See what extent at AstraZeneca have you mapped your processes and how are you using them for transformation initiatives?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And the 6 dimensions, by the way, I think it's a really great model. But to answer this specific question, it's a simple question, right? So I'll give you a simple answer. But to warn you that there is a huge but coming in my answer. So the simple answer is that at AstraZeneca, well, we're a very process-driven organization. So process mapping is used to a great extent for transformation initiatives because process provides a common language so that colleagues from different functions, such as supply chain, quality, engineering, and IT, are aligned on how our business runs. So this is really important for business transformations because those colleagues need to be able to visualize what is the future state process, the future state cross-functional processes, which includes the technology and the key data. So to give you a real example, we have a big SAP program, like a lot of organizations, the S4HANA program. And in itself, this is an enormous business transformation, which is going to impact many parts of AstraZeneca. But fundamentally, this is driven by the design of hundreds of detailed process models. So this is really super important to know because without having this alignment on how people, process data, and technology are expected to work together in the future, how can the SAP project be scoped out and planned? And how can SAP be designed, built, configured? When it comes to testing, what are we actually going to test against? And even when we go live, how will people who are actually doing the work know what they need to do, when they need to do it, what the expected outcomes are, and what are the procedures and the technologies that they need to use? Well, it comes down to the process maps, the process models. So the philosophy is very much you map it once, but then you use it 1,000 times throughout the life cycle of transformation. So that's the simple answer. So now this is the but, because, well, actually there's 2 buts. The first one is that process mapping on its own is actually of pretty limited value unless it's part of an overall life cycle of process ownership and management. The process maps no longer reflects the reality of what's happening and the value is lost. So then the second but is that to be valuable, process maps need to contain the critical knowledge about how the business really runs. So I'm talking about what are the people roles, what are the technologies, what's the data that's either being created or consumed, what are the risks, where are the customer touch points, where are the key decisions being made in the process. So a question for everyone listening in, right? So if I was to say to you, please can you give me a list in your business of the key decisions that are made, which have got a high impact or high risk, and where those decisions are being made manually today by people. How easy is it for you to do that? Because that's kind of how we operate, right? We come along with all this technology and say, hey, great, where should we put it? And often we're not directed properly. So we really need a digital representation of our key processes so we can understand exactly where the opportunities are around automation and artificial intelligence opportunities. So this is where a platform like GBTEC is fundamental because it helps us to model those different artifacts, which can then be used throughout the full IT lifecycle of digital transformation, which of course includes AI. Because processes really are assets and they have a huge value to the business, but only if they're appropriately cared for, Alex.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one of the things we see more and more from organizations is having, the requirement of having those processes documented to be able to do that analysis and identify opportunities and priorities when it comes to those automation opportunities or to drive that digital transformation cycle. So yeah, great insights there, David. Thank you. Now, the second point of this process excellence graphic we have here is around process governance. So again, nearly 8 out of 10 of our respondees said that enterprise process visibility is being lost because of fragmentation caused by silos of ownership and different tools being used across the business. I think one of the stats we saw was that only 3 out of 10 of our respondents had stated their organization had a single connected source of process truth throughout the business, with others, the remaining 70%, saying it was scattered on SharePoints, different tools, Word documents, or not documented at all. But the other side of this is in terms of the ownership of processes. And this is something, again, that there's a big grey area with organizations. Who exactly owns processes and is responsible for them? And you can see here, only about 20% of our respondees said it was processes were governed enterprise-wide with clear roles and accountability. So that means that 80% of those organizations weren't at this highest level of process ownership and how organizations should be owning their processes. So David, again, to throw back to you, in your own experience at AstraZeneca, who takes ownership of processes? And have you got any recommendations for those listening today on what the best approach would be?
Yeah, it's a great question, Alex. And I don't want to make out that we're absolutely perfect in AstraZeneca, because it is hard. But I know from my own experience in working in a lot of different companies and doing some recent benchmarking that actually AstraZeneca are reasonably good at this. So to answer the first question, if you'd have asked me 4 years ago, I'd have said that we're very siloed in AstraZeneca. Each business unit manages their own processes. But I think there's 3 significant things that have happened in AstraZeneca. The first one, I mentioned the SAP project. So I was asked to lead a project to select and implement a BPM platform in Readiness for SAP. So I was very happy that our senior leadership bought into the ambition that we shouldn't just be doing this for the project, we should be doing it for the whole organization, the whole enterprise. So that was the first event. The second event, despite now having a single platform, some of my colleagues actually said that, we should segregate the platform into the different business units areas. So R&D, finance, operations, and commercial, and they can basically all do their own thing. I had a really allergic reaction to this because, I really promote end-to-end thinking. And of course, a lot of our processes cross those business unit boundaries. So now we have an architecture for a common business process framework, which includes a value chain where the processes from all 4 of those business units can be connected end to end. So the third event was then to establish a center of process excellence. So I set this up initially to provide a service for the whole AstraZeneca enterprise by taking central ownership of the platform, but also providing good standards for modeling, training, and governance. So the question then, day to day, the ownership of processes, well, technically it sits in the business units and even within the business units, within functions inside those business units. So to a certain extent, we're still quite functionally organized, but there's much more of a culture now of end-to-end thinking. And we definitely encourage our process owners to collaborate when they undertake change and transformation. So to give you an example, in operations, we have about 50 business process owners in the global functions, and they own about 180 processes in total between them. So the process owners, they sit in global functions, but they have networks of change and transformation agents across the business, across those 30-odd manufacturing sites, for example, who can roll out those global processes locally, including technology and data aspects. But then they can also receive feedback in terms of issues and opportunities. And a key point is that those process owners, they're not alone, right? They operate these networks, which have got change agents, subject experts, people from IT, people from specialist functions like quality and sustainability. So all 4 of those aspects of people, process, data, and technology are basically covered by the process ownership approach. So then you also asked what my recommendation is, which is really tough, right? Because every business is different. But I think in general, I'd say 3 things, right? And these are, I've brought my magic wand. So these are magic wand things, okay? Because I appreciate saying these things is a lot easier than being able to do them. So I'm going to wave my magic wand. The first thing to happen is that you know what your key processes are that you need to So this is really important because the senior leader can sponsor and guide the owner strategically to drive the appropriate level of investments in process transformation. So this is a key point, because if you don't have to transform every process, right? This is the whole thing about BPM and process excellence, working on the right things at the right time. So focus on the processes that matter, and especially where there's a performance gap. So the second wave of the magic wand is having a single process management platform for your business, because this is then two things. It's a collaboration platform first and foremost, but it's also a digital database of knowledge about how the business actually works. So I can quote Gartner from a BPM guide that they produced a couple of years ago, where they said BPM tools are foundational to digital transformation, and they encourage visibility, collaboration, and orchestration across systems and teams. So then the final wave of the magic wand, the third thing, is having a center of excellence. And this will make a difference, because it improves the efficiency of process management, because it makes it easier for process owners to do their job. So depending on the size of the company, you can still have a center of excellence, which is basically one person or two people, or for large organizations like ours, we have nearly 100,000 colleagues, then we obviously need a bigger team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw some thumbs up while you were speaking there, David. So some people in the audience, they're definitely agreeing with what you've been saying. But from our own experience, people are coming to use the big platform definitely to get that formalized approach to process ownership, and they can see the benefits from putting that in place, certainly. If I move us on to our next slide. So the third aspect we'll be discussing today of process excellence will be around the aligning of enterprise architecture with your processes. So you can see again, a very high number of our respondees believe that enterprise architecture without process alignment leads very much to just expensive guesswork. And this is very much the case, as you can see, with the breakdown of the figures here, with about 50% of our respondees not having a strong alignment between enterprise architecture and process management. And this means they are unable to fully identify redundancies, make smarter decisions when it comes to their tooling and their software within an organization. And this can very much hamper their efforts when it comes to transformation within their business unit or within the organization as a whole. So again, David, not to give you a moment's rest, what are the benefits of a strong alignment, in your opinion, between business processes and enterprise architecture? And how are you connecting these two things at AstraZeneca?
Yeah, this is funny. This question comes up everywhere I've ever worked. I think this one's come up. It's a great question. In this answer, I'm going to talk about the business and IT, which I don't like talking about them as separate entities, because we're all the business, really, aren't we? But to make it simple, the IT think in terms of capabilities and the business think in terms of process. And this confuses people. What's the difference? So I try to simplify this by explaining that basically a capability describes what a business wants to be able to do, but it doesn't say how it's going to achieve it. Whereas a process will give the how by describing the sequence of tasks, including the people roles, the technology, and the data that achieves the outcome. So as an example, you might have a capability which is product development, and the individual processes will include things like product design and product testing. But so what? Why do we even care that there's a difference here? Well, there is a difference, okay, because that's how IT work and the business work with processes. So we have to have a strong alignment. And the reason is because if you don't know how specific capabilities connect with different business processes, it's very challenging then to ensure that there's alignment between the investment decisions that are made in IT and making sure that those investment decisions deliver on business goals. Because how can you effectively deliver an IT change without knowing which processes are going to be impacted and what that impact is going to be on the people, the process, the data, and technology. So in AstraZeneca, we have a single enterprise architecture tool, and this is only something that's come in relatively recently. We haven't always been like this, but it's made a big difference now, where we've got the organizational capabilities are defined, but these capabilities are then linked to specific business processes in our BPM platform. So then basically, thanks to having the language of process, it means that everyone can talk the same language across both the business and IT, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the massive focus with automation and AI at the minute. This is only an alignment that's going to need to go closer and closer to be effective moving forward as well, from what we're hearing from our own customers. Now, embedded GRC. So this is the fourth element aspect of our process excellence framework. So again, a huge number of our respondees, over 80%, gave the opinion that GRC should be embedded from process design through to execution, rather than just being a tick box exercise at the end of this process. However, we can still see a huge chunk of our respondees don't practice what they preach. You can see whilst the majority of organizations do involve compliance, risk and audit teams, throughout the process cycle, over 30%, or nearly a third of our respondees said there wasn't this consistent involvement by these teams. And this is opening them up to a lot of risks and potential pitfalls during these transformation efforts. So again, David, great to hear your thoughts on why do you think it's valuable for involving enterprise risk from the beginning stages of process design? And how do you think are the best ways both GRC and process teams benefit from this collaborative approach?
Well, in the first question, I think the key word there is outset, because if you wait until the end of process design before you think about risks and controls, there's a really strong likelihood that you're going to have to rework the processes, which is then going to impact the timeline and the cost and potentially the reputation of the projects that you're working on, because people hear about these things. Wow, they got to the end and they had to redo all the processes. So the later you discover the need for a new control in a process, the more expensive it becomes. So I think then the collaborative approach, when designing a process, it's definitely best practice to try to involve subject experts who've got the knowledge of the risks for that process, so that when you design the process, it can be designed to mitigate those risks proactively from the start rather than reactively.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to be having to revisit old ground when issues come out later down the works. That will slow down your projects, initiatives, and maybe even lead to very negative consequences for you as a business. Now, on to our penultimate portion of the process excellence framework, which is automation readiness. So just under half, as you can see, of our respondees said they were encountering difficulties when trying to automate processes. And this is very much hampering their ability to deliver the operational value that they've suggested is possible through these transformation initiatives. And on this next slide, you can very much see why. That nearly half of these organizations aren't consistently and regularly using processes to inform workflow execution or automation execution. And you can see one of the quotes we had from one of our respondees, that without fully documented processes, the automation ROI is low. And unless you have that high level of good bedrock of process excellence, you're never going to see the figures that you see software vendors put on their banners of 200-300% ROI, because you are building on leaky foundations, essentially. So David, again, coming back to you, how do you think organizations can better bridge the gap between process modeling and the real world execution of these processes?
Yeah, thanks. And I was slightly distracted there because I was just reading the analogy from Diane on the BPM being a vehicle, but which is a great analogy. But yes, to answer the question, the first thing is the process modeling standards, because if you model processes that are really high level and they don't have any of the details that you need, that I mentioned before, applications, interfaces, data, etc., then you can't bridge the gap without basically remodeling the process. So definitely take a digital first approach when it comes to modeling. So model that to-be future state process that assumes that those new technologies are in place. So very much, the what, not the how. So for example, step 3 is a decision that's going to be made by agentic AI, and step 4 in the process is then going to be a human in the loop that validates that decision. So then what you need to add is the detail onto that the IT people, the business analysts, the data analysts need to know, so that they can then build, test, and implement digital data solutions. Because obviously just saying this step is going to be AI is that's not giving them a lot to go on, is it? You need to know, well, what's the criteria? What are the business rules? What's the data? Is there actually a data quality standard? And then connect that to the process, because then the process glues all of that critical information together and gives context for the people in IT who are actually implementing this technology. The second thing is then to provide those processes, once you go live, obviously, to the people who are actually doing the work, and use a platform that makes it easy for them to execute the process. So this is typically taking them step by step through the process to help them to understand what they need to do, when they need to do it, and what the expected outcomes are, and then which technologies and data that they need to use. So if you're using systems like SAP, then generally those systems will take care of that real world execution, because the workflows are built in. But then outside of these monolithic ERP systems, there's still a significant percentage of processes that exist. And how do those get executed? Well, I bet you it's email and spreadsheets. That's normally the case, right? Which is when you get a lot of variation and inconsistency and knowledge in people's heads and all that stuff. So this is why then in that kind of situation, having a platform like GBTEC, which can directly orchestrate the execution of a process model that you've defined in GBTEC, and you don't have to redevelop it in another tool. This is a real advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. That ability to save time, not having to remodel the same process in multiple different systems, to move between theoretical and the real world, is definitely something our customers find really useful. And I know you've mentioned AI a few times, David, so I think that brings us some nice foreshadowing onto our final element of our process excellence framework, is AI enablement. So you can see here the overwhelming majority of those that we've surveyed are going to be, saying that AI needs to be put in place and that within their businesses. However, that it needs this structured and governed processes to deliver the maximum value, and that without this structured, governed processes, they're not going to have the effect that a lot of organizations think they're going to have in delivering these transformative efforts, or this potential cost savings, boost to productivity that we all anticipate AI can generate. And as it says at the top, AI is only as good as the processes it's based on. So final question from me, David, for you. How have you seen process management evolve throughout the course of your career or in recent years? And do you believe it's becoming more and more important in the age of AI?
Yeah, massive evolution of process management, especially in recent years, because we're moving away from the sort of traditional human-centric process on focus on process documentation and compliance. And we're moving much more towards technology and AI-powered processes now. So leveraging things like predictive analytics, automation, process mining. So in terms of the relevance of process management in the age of AI, well, it's funny because, believe it or not, AI has actually been around for decades. Because I even majored on AI in the final year of my computer science degree back in the day, back in the early 90s. And at the time, AI was pretty much theoretical because we didn't have processing power, storage capacity, the data wasn't available that we have today. So it was a great theoretical exercise. And since then, I've gone down the process excellence route in terms of my career. So I find it quite amusing now that AI has returned with a vengeance, and I've actually realized that all the stuff I've been doing around process excellence is actually really beneficial, because AI needs process as much as process needs AI. Because there's a real danger, and not just with AI, with all technologies. If we just throw technology into the business and hope it sticks, then quite often it underachieves and we miss opportunities. So I've always advocated a process-led digital and AI transformation approach. And here's why. The first reason I think is really around process management. Like Diane said, it can help to identify which processes and precisely where in those processes AI can improve performance in a way that aligns to business goals. So you've heard the cliche, how do we make the boats go faster? Well, is there any point doing lots of work and transforming a process that ultimately doesn't make the boats go faster? The next challenge is AI, the delivery of that change, and from how we work today to the new way of working. But if you're already operating a process management approach in your organization, then you don't need to do anything different. It's just another change. It just happens to be AI. Now, governance with AI, that is slightly different. And this is really key. And in AZ, we have an AI governance framework to minimize the risks of AI. And through process models, we can really make sure we design the process properly and we validate that it's going to meet the governance requirements before go live to mitigate the AI risks for the process. And then if we fast forward a few years, you know what's going to happen, right? We are going to have AI coming out of our ears across every single type of business. But this is then the problem, because we'll have so much, we won't actually know what we've got. We won't be able to see the wood for the trees. You know, AI is out there, but where are we using it? And as importantly, are there still key decisions being made out there that aren't using AI? So this is why we need this database of critical knowledge about how our processes connect with technology. So this is, in my view, Alex, the best practice that organizations should try to establish.
Fantastic. I know we're coming up to time, but thank you very much for those, David, those insights. You know, super interesting to hear what you're doing at AstraZeneca and your thoughts on, you know, process excellence and how it can be used to drive these transformation initiatives. So one final slide to summarize today is these key characteristics of what process excellent organizations look like. And this is having this shared taxonomy, ownership of processes at all levels, the ability to scale governance, whether it's, you know, be from one business unit enterprise wide, having this alignment between technology and process, and the fact that this continuous improvement is an ongoing cycle as well within their businesses. If you are interested in learning a bit more around our paper, you can see a QR code on the screen now. If you scan that, you will be taken to the page to download the full report with full details, more information and insights from David in there as well as some other experts in the field. But I know we are at time, but happy to answer any questions if there are any, Georgina. I know we don't take too much longer.
Thank you very much indeed, both of you, David and Alex. Unfortunately, we are out of time at this precise moment. So I would like to encourage everybody who would like to ask questions to please do reach out either via the QR code, which you've just seen, but also please reach out via LinkedIn, and you'll find both David and Alex's LinkedIn details on the lobby page. So please do continue the conversation further from here. But that was very, very insightful. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences, David. You know, it's great to bring it to life. Much appreciated.
You're very welcome, Georgina. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.